All right. We are up. We are live. We're going to give it a couple of minutes to let the streaming platforms pop in here. So we are going to be live on LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter. One day we won't have to say formerly known anymore. Maybe when
Because they're going to go right at Twitter.
yeah, maybe that. And then live on YouTube. I say we because I am with one of my really good friends, mastermind partner, brother in the Lord, and co-founder of the Founders Collective, Sam Feeny. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself? You can say whatever you want.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hang out with you on an unseasonably cool day in Denver, Colorado. And just, yeah, I love hanging out. And you and I were texting back and forth last night about, we just kind of was on our hearts. And so, I love the ability to do this from, a few hundred miles away and to be able to just be able to jam on topics that matter to us. In particular, ones that I think resonate with people when they're named. And so we're going to get into that. But yeah, I'm really excited to hang out a little bit about me. I've been in the education field for a really long time in various forms. And I'm really excited about teaching what I've learned and what I want to learn. Because I think that's, if anybody who's ever taught anything, that you really learn it once you teach it. And so that's what most of my books are, is stuff that I want to learn myself. And then, of course, most of all, turning around and teaching that to my 5 kids, and just being able to leave them better than what I got, growing up, each generation better than the next.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that so much, man. And it's funny because when you say, I have this background in teaching, it sounds really flat, when people don't know you. And what they don't know is the depth of what you teach, and just the wisdom that you have shared in so many of the books, or, in the books that you've written, in so many of just the other things that you have contributed. I mean, when we get together. So for those of you that aren't familiar, and many of you won't be that watch this, but Sam and I had been, we were introduced to one another through a common connection. We ended up in a pretty large mastermind. We were in separate groups, but we were in a large mastermind together, all Christian men, seeking to just to live out our faith and our values professionally, personally, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And it was great. We found ourselves in a season where we felt as though that wasn't serving us to the best of our personal needs anymore. And so we stepped out of that. And then Sam and I, along with the other 3 founders of the Founders Collective, who you guys will be introduced to at some point, Cam Hall, Mike Suderman, and Zach Lush, we decided to get together and form our own. And so we've been journeying together for the better part of the last year, and really just going to war. And one of the things that we found was so beneficial was, in addition to this commonality of faith and values and life, was we were all in similar stages entrepreneurially, if that's a word, where we were all seeking to accomplish similar things. And for those of you that will see this, that as a founder or an entrepreneur, you're just in a unique position that other people are not. And that's not to say we're better or worse. It's just, it's different when you start a business, when pretty much everything just rides on you. And so you get these feelings of loneliness and stagnation. And anyway, so we have been able to solve that for one another in so many ways. And so I'm pumped. One of the things that we want to talk about today, so this was kind of a last minute, hey, we should jump on and talk about this. And really, this was Sam's idea, was just coming together and talking about the value of being in like-minded community. Interestingly enough, I read an article this morning that I shared with Sam. We won't talk too much about it because we don't know enough about it, having not done enough research. But I think one of the things that it exposed, and one of the things that I want to dig into as we talk more, is in the day and age that we live in, I would say I will go to the extreme. If you know my personality, this is mine, but I think men have been abandoned in many ways. We've kind of been cast aside. I think, for the amazing a gift that the women's empowerment movement has been. I mean, I'm married. I've got 2 daughters. Sam, Sam's well married, got kids. Like, we're trying to elevate women, and we want to see equality because we believe that God created us all in his image, meaning we all have equal worth and value. But as that has happened at a hyper accelerated level, men have kind of been pushed aside. And then with the push aside of toxic masculinity, which obviously it's bad, but it's been ill defined, we just find ourselves in a place where we don't know where to go. And men have less and less friends. We're seeing suicide amongst young men happen at a greater rate than probably ever in history. Anyway, so I'm excited to be able to chat some more today. So, Sam, why don't you kind of just open up and share a little bit about like, why do you see benefit in being, let's not just say with other men, because I think that we all find ourselves in spaces with other men, but why like-minded, and maybe how would you define like-minded? Because you and I don't think exactly alike. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, one thing I want to just take a step back and think about, just talk about for just a second about that article, and the idea behind it was the domestication of men, right? And I would say, because we could be extreme here, is the emasculation of men. The idea of generations of purpose are now that the purpose is being replaced, and I'm not saying that necessarily the purpose was right, or not, like there are always ills, right? It's right. Like my eighth grader is like, he's homeschool right now. We're teaching him history, and I was like, just so you know, like nobody's good at this. Like, it's gonna be a big fat mess in American history. So, we're gonna miss out on some things. Like you're gonna get some truth that you're not really comfortable with. But so in the same ways, we look at the role of men in society, in society at large, in their homes. There's a lot of that I think has just changed so much. And if you think about the purpose being changed, it hasn't been replaced. And so I think that's something that's very, very important for us to realize, for guys to realize, like suicide, pornography, playing video games for 5 hours a day is all a symptom of purposelessness.
Yeah.
When we're talking about this, so all that is to answer your question of like-mindedness for me is like-mindedness of purpose. And it doesn't have to be the same purpose. It's just that you have one. I mean, that is actually an incredibly clear differentiator for me when I'm hang out with guys, in about 30 minutes in, it's, meeting another family at a park, or meeting somebody at church, or, connecting with somebody on LinkedIn, you can find out pretty quick whether or not they have a purpose. And that's for me, level one of like-mindedness that I'm looking for, even if it's not the same purpose I have. Maybe I don't even like what your purpose is, but I give you like a tip of the cap to say, hey, at least you got one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my first way to think about that.
What I really appreciate about that is, so, I have the fortune to be able to go, and I know you do this too, going into organizations and associations and speaking and teaching on various topics. And so I talk a lot to salespeople, organizations, individuals. And one of the things that I say out of the gate in almost every single keynote, workshop, whatever, is if, I believe that it's God that put me here, that God created me with a purpose, that God intends for me to live out that purpose in my life. And then I always say, you don't have to attribute you being here to God. I wish you would, but you don't have to. But if you cannot at least believe that you were created intentionally for purpose, then it's going to be really hard for you to take anything else that I say, and really most people say, and run with it, right? We can all set goals. We can all strive for a variety of different things. But if we don't have an inherent purpose, it's really hard to create one from the outside, because it's just a formulation of everything else we hear and see. And we end up living what I say is one of the most miserable lives ever, because we're living somebody else's, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're being handed a script that we're reading, and we're stepping into a role that somebody else has created for us. It's interesting too, because when you think about like that outside in, when you're around somebody who has purpose, like I have a good friend named Mark, and I think about him a lot, because one of the things that I admire about him is that every morning he wakes up mad. Well, by that I mean he has a very clear mission and purpose, and it is the defining thing that when he's like, I've still got this thing I need to fix. And just being around him, it stirs me up because I know so many people who they'll see that, and more it becomes, man, I wonder what that's like. Or that was kind of like maybe like phase one, and now phase two is like, well, that's weird, or that, and so we're distancing ourselves from everybody having a purpose, and that's what we do. And whether it's from God, or which is something we think about, like the greatest generation, we're taking that up.
Yeah.
As each generation passes, it seems to be a tendency. This is all doom and gloom, but there seems to be a tendency of sort of an existential crisis because our distance from where we are and any sort of purpose seems to be growing greater and greater. And that's just a tough spot to be, because it is, like you were saying, the outside in part of it is it's very difficult to manufacture, and it's very difficult to, with fidelity, walk out somebody else's. It just puts you in a tough spot.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that. I think that while a lot of what we would talk about in topics like this or discussions like this sound very doom and gloomish, I think that I try to take it as we're trying to create realization around what's actually happening. Because if we live in oblivion, which I think many people do, right, there's part of us that is just inundated with information and we need to cleanse ourselves of that. But at the same time, when we're in oblivion to the fact that we're actually in a really tough spot right now, socially, culturally, but then just from a masculine standpoint, if we don't understand what's at stake, if we don't understand the situation that we're in, we're never going to be able to correct it. And so I watched a clip this morning. So Chris Williamson, he's kind of an up and coming creator, podcaster. He's a host of the Modern Wisdom podcast. He has just the most incredible guests on, and the who's who. And I saw a clip from him this morning, and he was reflecting back on one of the mass shootings, and was just saying that in that moment, he said, he had heard a story of three men that jumped on top of, I think it was their girlfriends, to shield them from bullets in the moment. And he said, if you have any kind of problem with that type of masculinity at all, I don't want to live this life with you, because you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. And I think, again, it brings to this realization that, we can talk all day about, having purpose and how that purpose plays out in our business and our life. And those things are really important. But I think there's this greater sense of masculine purpose that we're also missing out on, right? Which is, and this is where the like-mindedness comes into play with you and I, but it's like, God has created us, and you can define this many different ways, but as men, to be providers and protectors. And if we don't see this need to protect, then we are not going to see the absence of protection in society. And if we don't see the need nor the absence, then we're not going to step into it when it's happening. And so, like in New York right now, we're seeing the social media trend where women are walking down the street and they're getting punched in the side of the face and attacked by men just on the street randomly. Like, it's showing up on TikTok and Instagram. And it's not a joke thing. Like, women are truly being attacked on the public streets of New York, and nobody's doing anything about it, right? And you can say a lot about that, but at the end of the day, it's because we have become blind to the fact that we are called to step into those gaps. And there's nuance to every single one of those things. But again, I think this is what's at stake. It's like, in many ways, society is at stake, and ultimately God will fix that, but he's using us as vessels to do that.
Right. And I so to continue the train of thought of like-mindedness, then is, it's if I'm in a place where I'm surrounded by people who aren't concerned about what's going on.
Yep.
That's where I think you need to be choosier about your communities than we are. Oftentimes, really, it is like career, proximity, kids, sports, whatever it might be, that's our criterion for being able to hang out with people, our community. And so if we think about these things, and it's not something, and again, like this isn't promotion for vigilantism, and it's not, like we all need to go to New York and fix some things. I'll bring my telescoping bat. But I
don't think you get that on a plane.
Well, because when it's telescopes, anyway, it's very lightweight too, less than 3 ounces. But anyway, if you're in a community who isn't interested in sounding alarms, or I think a lot, just from my background in counseling psychology, is with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we too often are what I call living in the basement, which is really just those bottom two levels of physiological needs, and for our own selves, safety and security, which is basically maintaining those physiological needs. That's it. And so the next level up is relationships and belonging. And if we don't see that we belong to each other,
Yeah.
whether I don't know you and you live in New York and you're somebody who has been assaulted, and that I'm saying, hey, that's my problem, right? If I don't see that there is that sense of either a social contract or all members of the same body, like whatever you want to call it, that's the value of community. Is it goes beyond just what most of our communal decisions are made, or association decisions are made, which is what can I get from this? The
Yeah.
thing that I think differentiates what we are talking about, which would be really a proactive community, would be, where can I contribute and where can iron sharpen iron? Because it's not sharpened to then sit on the shelf. It's sharpened you into a tool, into a sword, into a whatever, so that it can be used. And that's where I think, I heard a guy say one time, balsa wood does not sharpen balsa wood. It's like you need to get around people who are interested in, again, whatever their purpose is, and they feel that purpose is connected to a who. I have a training that we've talked about before called the Great Commission Statement, where I just took the Great Commission and said, Jesus taught us how to build a personal mission statement. But the three components that are really, really important in that, one of those is who my audience is. And until I have a place where I apply that, a people to whom I apply that, then it's hard for me to live out my mission. And so
that's right.
where community is so huge, it's either that forum for it, or it's a group of people who want to kind of be focused on the same audience as it goes through it. That's where I think we're missing a lot of in our daily lives, just our maintaining. We're not getting that level of meaning because we're not applying it in ways that we could.
Yeah, dude. There were so many things. First of all, the retweetable statement you made, which is iron is not sharpened to sit on the shelf, I think is phenomenal, and it's going to go on a T-shirt of mine here pretty soon. I also want to say shout out to, there's some people that are listening live right now or watching live right now. If you are, YouTube, X, LinkedIn, comment, just weigh in. If you have a question, anything like that, feel free to fire them off. So thank you guys for being here live. This will also be replayed, and so you can just DM us if you like something that was said, and we'll talk about it on the future discussion. Okay, so what I love here too was the correlation between, you said without an audience, a mission statement is basically meaningless. What I really love is not trying to make this huge jump, and I think it's so important, is this is our entrepreneurial journey as well, because so often we try to create a business without an audience, or we try to create a business with the entire audience. Right. And so it's like, how
everybody.
Right. And so, like, this is Alex Hormozzi's $100 million offers. He talks about this over and over and over again, which, huge shout out to Alex. Like, I think he's one of the greatest creators of our generation, at least in this moment, and just his simplicity in what he gives. But, it's common sense that we need to have a clearly defined target market, because if not, we're offering to nobody. We're not offering to everybody. And so it's just so interesting that you said that, because I think they're so directly correlated. And what I often see is those founders and entrepreneurs that are struggling in their business with that lack of a clear ideal client profile, target market, whatever you want to call it, or an ill-defined one at best, also have a lack of or an unclear personal mission and vision.
Yes.
Right. It's just so interesting how those things are. It's like, if you have one, you typically at least can get to the other reasonably quickly. But if you don't have one, it's probably a symptom of not having the other.
Yeah. And I've never done this personally, but I've heard about people who've done this. So why don't you bring it up? it's interesting too. So like the title of this conversation is value of community of people who get you. So think about this. We're I'm starting out to talk about like who are my guys, right? Like who are my, the 6 people who can carry your coffin or your mastermind group or whatever it is. But also thinking about, I love the business parallel because you need to build communities of people who get you in order to be able to deliver your product to them. And your product could be a nonprofit. Your product could be something that you're a tangible thing you're selling. It could be, something that when you're teaching or writing books or whatever it is. Right. And that also, the value of a community who gets you, that's is it Kevin, something that begins with a K, the thousand raving fans. Like that's your community who gets you, and those are the people you write for. Those are the people you create for, and then they will turn and share with their communities of people who get them. That's you're creating ripple effects that way. So that's such a good point about the fact that you actually have the power to create that. And one of my favorite marketing guys, Mike Kim, who's much more quiet and reserved than Alex Hormozi, but one of the things for him that cuts through in his marketing is just remember that good marketing both attracts and repels. And I think that's one of the keys for community and for like-mindedness is being okay with saying, this isn't for everybody. And I'm not for everybody. And not being afraid that is then not tolerant or not an acceptable message or, exclusive of others. It's not. It's just we all have like our people. Like we all have I think that our people we're called to connect with. Kevin Kelly, thank you, buddy. And so when we have as creators, entrepreneurs, whatever it is, the ability to create communities that get us by putting out stuff that is true to us, right? It's not a jump, but hey, I'm just gonna put this out and see who else likes it, and that's my crew. That's my community, and that's a very empowering place to be. And I don't think a lot of people have that faith in themselves to do it.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question that I'm actually just interested to hear from you. So you talked about the fact that, for you, you want to journey with a man that has purpose. They don't have to share in the same purpose as you. Obviously, we've talked about the fact that you and I don't share all the same values, beliefs, ideas, though we're fairly similar. What those, Sam, would be, because I think this is important, is like, what would be non-negotiables? What are things that are, and I know this is hard, right? Because there's a lot of nuance here too, but it's like, what are things that you say, because I have some things that come to mind, but what are some things you say, these are absolute no ways? Because, and I just want to share this, I find that for us as men, we end up finding ourselves in common space with other men that aren't like us, but have gravitated towards us, or we gravitated towards because of history, proximity, an extended relationship of some kind, and we're there and we begin to tolerate things, is maybe the way to say that, that starts to drag us into that space, right? It's like you are the product of the 6 people that you surround yourself with, and so what are some things that you're like, I will absolutely not be in community with these types of individuals?
Yeah, and another way I think of this is these are the guardrails, right? Where you're drifting, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this like slope is now a cliff, that's the word, and you're off the rails before you even realize it. So, yeah, and that's an awesome question. So I'll say one thing right off the bat is that our buddy Zach has a really cool exercise about kind of identifying some non-negotiables. That's something I think even just is another cut through of, do you have those? Is that, for somebody else of having some of those non-negotiables, because we are very easily influenced by those around us, even though we would adamantly protest to that assertion. Say, no way, I'm my own guy, the whole thing. But it is that association and that rubbing off on each other that makes good community so powerful, and haphazard community so atrophying and in some cases damaging. So one for me would be that and this is a kind of a twofold thing, but I'm very, very motivated by legacy. And I don't necessarily mean that I have to have a big legacy, right? It's not it, but um, I just in my mind, really early in my life, I had this sense that what I'm passing on to my kids is more about example than it will be ever tangible things. And that example started roughly when I started making conscious decisions. So I'm saying like 12, 13, right? Like really early on in my life, which means I'm going to have to sit down sometime and explain what in the world I was doing in college. And I don't know how I'm going to say that other than please learn from my experience.
I just wrote it all in my book and told my kids to read it, knowing they never will.
That's correct. That's right. That's right. There's an Easter egg on page 72. I'll give you the combination of the safe in my office. But so there's something about like that I'm living in more than just the present. Like I've got an infinite or at least long-term view on what I'm doing that contextualizes what I do. Similarly, is that I've got to be others focused in one way or another. It cannot just be what I'm doing is all to benefit me, because like stewardship, as you know, is a big word for me. And I think I've been entrusted with, in particular, my wife and my kids, but also the people in my life at the time, and how am I able to be able to give and to pour into them. So I think it's about contribution. It's that greater whole that we're able to contribute to. And I think it was Walt Whitman said, that the powerful play may continue and that we might contribute a verse. He was like, oh, look, it's not me. This is like, there's a lot of lines in this thing, but that's about, those two are in particular really big deals, because again, like we could do it in different ways. We could, be contributing to the maybe organizations that I don't necessarily, support or whatever, but an others focused long-term approach to life, that covers a bunch of things that don't turn into me thinking about myself. And when I think about myself as higher than others, that's where I get into destructive behaviors. That's where, I'm not leaving a good legacy for my family, like that type of thing. And so that's taken a bit to figure out, but those guys were two real big ones that kind of capture a bunch of other things as subsets.
Well, leave it to you to say the really smart thing. I I was
yours blows over hose.
Yeah. And then the opposite. No. It's interesting because I love that, and I think it's so important to consider things like that, because that's deep meaning, and I think that that's how we journey in life together. And when that's something that's so important to you, like it is to you, I know that you get dragged down when it's not important to others, it's non-existent. For me, there's simple things too, and I think these are the things that just drive me nuts. And it's like I can extend grace, but at some point I just cut people loose. And so it's for me, it's simple things like I won't exist in an environment where men are talking bad about their wives behind their backs. Like the idea of cheating, I wouldn't have a friend that cheated unless they made that mistake, owned up to that mistake, and they were walking through the path of restoration with their spouse, right? So like that's important to me. Liars, again, we all fight against that tendency a lot, I'm sure, but people that are just outright lying to look good in front of other people or to deceive other people, like these things, these are character flaws that I once was many of these things, and I cannot allow myself to be exposed to getting dragged back into them. Another one that I think is really, really bad is, especially for men, we have a tendency to play hard with words with each other, which can be really, really fun. But when it turns into tearing each other down or tearing people down intentionally, I think that is something that we have got to fight against. And again, if it's in the confines of our own little, tight knit community and we're messing and playing with each other, that's one thing. But I think that what I see a lot of times happen is men get cliquey, which kind of sounds funny that you say men and cliquey together. That's like a female thing more often than not, but it's like men get cliquey and then they start bad mouthing men outside of that. And I just think that that's just such poor taste and poor character. And then the last one that I think has become more and more important to me as time has gone on is people that are just unhealthy and unmotivated. Obviously, we're all in a different space when it comes to kind of our physical health and even mental and emotional health, spiritual health. But if you're not motivated to do something about it, I have a hard time being around you for a long period of time. And again, that is not because I'm any better than anybody else. Like I'm actually looking up to and admiring a guy like Cam, who is in fantastic physical shape and is leading the charge and helping other men to do that. And so I'm trying to to move in that direction. But it's more of just it's telling of a man's intention with his own life and with his purpose when he has just reserved to, I'm just going to turn into a slob and kind of be lazy. And I'm not going to have many goals or any goals at all, other than maybe whenever somebody else has set for me or my wife has told me I need to do. Like I don't, I don't feel like I have the capacity to spend time in those types of arenas. Again, not only because I don't like that for those people, but it's just not helpful to me, right? Like I'm trying to move forward in all aspects that God calls me to. And so I think those things are important.
Yes, I love it. Real quick, save it top for just one second. I want to comment what we did, because if you're tracking with this and like, well, I don't really necessarily have non-negotiables, what's really fun is how differently we've built ours, which is mine's like aspirational, here's what I'm shooting for, and yours is here's what I'm trying to avoid. And either of those are awesome, right? One of them, I call the other side of the coin activity. Anytime you want to try to figure out what you want and you're like, I don't know, like nobody's really asked me that before, right? The other side of the coin is, what do you not want? You're like, oh man, I can give you that list, right? And so those are both awesome ways to build your list of non-negotiables. But I love that question, because we need to talk, I think, more often about our non-negotiables to keep them in the forefront of our mind as a lens for how we're operating and with whom we're interacting. That's great.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And actually, that was something that I wanted to pose to you, and I think that you articulated it well. Was just, as a man listening to something like this, and even this can be applied to ladies, you too, for your communities of like-minded women. But I think that as a man that maybe doesn't have this, how do you enter into this? And so I think that you articulated that well, which was like you have to consider for yourself, what's important to you, and through, your Great Commission statement, there's other, resources that are available like it. It all is going to have to go back to, if you don't have at least a reasonable idea of who you are, your own personal mission, vision, and values, it's going to be hard to say these are my guardrails in a community, or these are my deterrents in a community, because how can you define something that's external if you don't even know what's internal? So I think it's super helpful that you spoke to that. So we've been going for just about a half hour here, just over a half hour here, and I know just time flies, and I want to be respectful of trying to keep this confined to others. But again, thank you if you're live right now, and I've seen quite a few people popping in and out. So thank you so much for listening to this live. Again, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, please feel free to drop in and say something. Even if you just like it, we appreciate that. We will be doing more of these at off times. It may not always be Saturdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time, but we're gonna try to make this a more regular occurrence. So as we're starting to land the plane, one of the things that I think is important for you is, or for me to ask you, because I think you're really good about creating the steps necessary to get to your goal. And I don't think that's as simple as setting a goal and planning for it. I think you have a really good way about structuring in such a way to get to where you need to go. And you've done that helping people in their careers, you've done that helping people in their businesses and their lives, whatever. So if I'm a guy and I'm listening to something like this right now, and the title attracted me, I'm like, oh, the value of community with people who would get me, right? Like that sounds awesome. And then you've listened to this whole thing, or maybe one or two things we've said, and you're like, yeah, you know what? That is like, I need that. That's me. So how could you encourage another guy listening to start to formulate stepping into something like this? Because it would be easy for us to say, and definitely we would want to say like, hey, we've created the Founders Collective. This is an amazing community. We want you to join this. If our message resonates with you, any bit of it, we do believe this is a space for you. And so you can reach out to us for that. But I don't want to oversimplify that. And so I would say, like, the guy sitting on the outside, he's looking in and he's like, man, think that could be something for me. What would be some kind of first next steps that you feel like would be helpful, Sam?
Yeah, actually, kind of similar to that other side of the coin. One thing I would think about was go back to a time when you had a community who got you. So I'm thinking a lot of times one of the things that I really am sensitive to, and the first game of the Final Four starts in about an hour or so. And you're going to see guys who might be playing their last college basketball game. I'm hoping it's SC State because I've got Purdue going to the final. Anyway, uh, so, hey,
If you are a praying person, pray.
I'm not a praying person. One of my favorite lines from a movie is, "I believe that God gets weary of being called down on both sides." Anyway, but I'll tell you this. So think back. But one of the things that I'm most sensitive to, and a lot of my work in education has been around helping people find colleges and work doing that type of thing. But is the guy who, or woman, my wife played college basketball, 4 years of college. The guy who they play their last game, and the next morning they wake up and are like, what am I supposed to do? Right? Because all of a sudden, the community of people who got you is gone.
Yeah.
And in particular, maybe it's something that you've done for, let's just say it's college in general, right? But you just were in a fraternity, or you were just on a college campus you really liked, or whatever. Like for 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, maybe that was a time when you had that community of people who got you. What I wanted you to do when I think about this, and then how this applies to now, is go back to that time, because it's probable, it's not necessarily a guarantee, but it's probable you really haven't had that since, right? And then, which is a really weird spot, is we go through, unfortunately, sometimes of the factory model in high school, but then we go to a college, or choosing that, you're getting to a chance to create some networks, and then we go from a very tight-knit group sometimes in college to now everyone's an individual. Good luck. Like, go out into the world, figure it out on your own, and that whole thing. And so I just want to encourage somebody who maybe is wary about this, or like, this seems foreign because I haven't experienced it. I'm guessing you have. I just want you to go back to a time when you have and think through, like, oh, I've done this before, right? I played on a sports team, or whatever it is. I was in a youth group in high school or something. Like, I've done that. That's just that allows you almost a little bit of muscle memory and confidence to say, oh, okay, well, if I've done that before, even on in a different context or on a smaller scale, I can do it again. The other thing I would think through, this is something that's been particularly relevant for me, is, and it relates to mentorship and community. And one of the reasons why you and I connected, even though I don't know that you know this, but there were 3 times in my life when I look back and think, oh my gosh, if I would have had a mentor or a mastermind community at that point in time, I would have made a very, very different decision. And that weight of, oh crap, basically, like, there's 5 years I'm not getting back on that path that I took. That makes me run to a community, because I also know what that feels like. And so that, for someone who's listening or watching, that might be something as well, where you say, hey, what's a time when you think, another set of eyeballs on this might not have been a bad idea. You said something the other day, we were on a call, and you said, with what we've created at Founders Collective, you can't imagine how far each of us would be along if we'd started it 2 years ago.
Oh,
dang it. You're so great.
Oh, you say that, and as you're saying that right now, probably the most, there's been a couple really disruptive seasons of life for me, but one of the most devastating, because it collected so many of those around me, was from 2000, I call it 8 or 9 to 2013, was just a destructive financial season of life. And there was a lot of financial abuse on my end, and just mismanagement of money and other things. And then the recession and all this other stuff that ended with, punchline, we lost our house, just short sale. And that was, so we bought the house in 2001. And so it's been 23 years, and I try not to live with regret. And I know that God has purpose and intention for everything. This one was just a hard learning lesson. But I think back to, when I bought that house in 2001, like my wife and I did not have any guidance from the outside at all. Like my mom was very supportive of us and helped us to buy that home, helped us with the down payment, but we didn't have anybody. My dad was not in the picture. He would have been the smartest one financially to really guide us through buying. I was trying to be the smartest person in the room, and I was quote unquote the most successful one in my friend group, which I just prided myself in. So there was nobody to even tell me what to do. No one had bought a house in my friend group before. And
And
so
can I
2
interject for a
years,
second? Were you even
yeah,
approachable?
no
Like,
way,
right?
no
Like,
way.
that's the worst
Well,
part.
because I had made my
Oh
money,
my
I had bought
God.
my house, right? Yeah, like I figured it all out. And so within 2 years, the market rocket ship from 2001 to 2003. Home values went crazy. And I remember getting the first call from the mortgage broker, and he's like, dude, rates just went down. You can refinance. And not only that, but you can actually cash out. And I was like, we can get $50,000 and we put a lot of it into the house, but not everything. And that just created this cycle. And I think back all the way to then, and I think to myself, for certain, that house would have been paid off by now. I would have never lost that house. It would have been paid off by now, right? It's all these what ifs. And then all of the other horrific decisions I made in my life at that point. Again, I wasn't approachable, but if I would have been surrounded by a forceful group of men that was really willing to push in, including my dad, who I didn't have any relationship with then, things would have been so much different. So that is just like, it's things like that that haunt me. And so now that's why I am so grateful to be in community with you guys, because I mean, when it comes to, like, I love the fact that you don't just know what my business goals are. You know that I had struggles in my marriage early on, and I fight to never ever be there again. And you hold me accountable to that. You know that I love my daughters, and I try to pour into them, and you hold me accountable to that. And you know that, like, I did have financial issues a long time ago. And so as I share financial decisions, you're like, hey, what about this? Oh, not about this. So it's like, that's what I love. Again, it's not that we're dialed into every single thing, but you guys know enough to pour into everything I need. And again, I can still make a stupid mistake, but the chances of that happening are far less, which means I will be far more successful from this point forward. It's just a shame that I'm figuring it out for the first time. I'm 46 right now, and it's only been a couple of years. So it's just like,
Yes.
man, what I would have done with
There's a
earlier.
fun part of that too, is like if you do make that mistake or that move, because it's not a micromanagement club, right? Then it's so
Right.
much more quickly corrected, right? Where you're like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
okay, I've got that course correction right back to my true north. And I'm just gonna add one more thing that I think would be really important. This maybe is how we can kind of wrap up, is thinking again about, okay, times when I've been part of a community, times when I really wish I would have. The question that I think at the end of the day people need to answer is whatever my point B is. Do I have one? Right? Is if there's something that I'm aspiring to do, if I have a mission, if I have a need in the world that I want to help meet, if I have personal goals for my family, whatever, is that important enough to bring somebody else in on? And that's what the community does for you. I got to this point in my early 40s. I'm coincidentally 46 as well, where I started realizing, you know what? If it's important enough, I eventually ask for help. So why am I not just asking for help at the beginning? Because don't I like being on a team, and don't I like running with guys? And like, why don't we just be proactive and say, hey, I've got something I need to work on. Who wants to help me? Like, let's go. And so but I think often enough, why people are content to just hang and not connect with others who are like-minded is because they don't have something big enough to compel them to get out of off the couch, get out of their comfort zone, whatever it is, and say, hey guys, you know what? I got to be real. There's a reason I haven't done this before, and I need help with it.
Yeah, dude, that is so good. That's the perfect way to land the plane. I'll wrap that up with just a bow and say, if you're sitting on the couch right now you're not listening to this probably, but if you happen to catch this and you're sitting on the couch and you have no desire, don't bother because we don't want to hear it. In the most loving way, I say, I don't want to hear it. And I know Sam doesn't either. But if there is the least little inkling in you that there is something greater for you, I would encourage you to find a like-minded community. We believe that we can be that for the right people. We're trying to be really, really clear about who we are and therefore what we represent as we step forward into this. So you can reach out to us. We'll make sure that in the replays of these things that there's ways to get in touch with Sam and myself. Shout out, Mark Testa is live on one of the platforms. I think he's on LinkedIn, but he just said he's excited to be a part of this community, the Founders Collective. He's one of the early adopters here jumping in. We're super pumped to have guys like Mark that are on their own journey. And eventually we'll be highlighting a lot of the other men that are in this community through these discussions and having them on and having these discussions much larger. But we would encourage you, reach out to us, connect with us. If there's anything that we can do to support you, we definitely want to do that because we feel that's, a big part of what we've been called to do. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, we're going to be doing this a lot more. We would love feedback to just what kind of topics, what do you want to hear about? What do you want to talk about inside our Founders Collective community? We do have some intentionality with the things that we are talking about. That's for that private community. But generally speaking, if there's other things that you want us to address, that you have questions around, please feel free to reach out to Sam or I or any of the other founders, Cam, Mike, or Zach, and we'd be happy to figure out how we can deliver that to you. So, Sam, this was good, dude. Like for throwing this, together on hey, we should just jump on and do this. This was pretty phenomenal. And I think what's always best, and this is just a affirmation for you, is there is not a single time that I've ever had a conversation with you that I have not left better. Because there's always something you say, even if I've heard it before, that you just have a way of saying it that speaks directly into my life. So I know that I'm in a good community because I'm in one with you. So man, I appreciate you so much. And yeah, it's been so fun.
You too, brother. I feel like maybe I wonder if that's because we're like-minded. But it's so true, man. That's where it's so great jamming with you on this stuff because of your ability to identify those pain points, right? Like Wounds is right behind you on the wall. Awesome book that just gets real about stuff that people need to get real about. And so I love that mirror being able to being held up to me as well whenever we talk about, well, man, am I dealing with that as much as I should? Am I pressing into that as much as I should to be able to get real about stuff that really matters? And that's where I think one of the things that's most fun about what we're building is talking about stuff that matters and being able to get people moving on their journey wherever they want to go.
It's so good, man. All right. With that, happy Saturday, you guys. We're out.